warm welcome, huge welcome to everybody who's joining us this morning. We've got so many people registered. It's going to be a really exciting session. There's lots of familiar faces. There's some people that I've worked with over 20 years ago. So I'm really excited to welcome you here today. And of course, some new faces. And also I can see some of our clients have also joined. So I'm certain this is going to be a really good session. Now, if you can all possibly locate the chat box, hopefully you're all familiar with Zoom. I think we're all pretty familiar with it these days. But if you can locate the chat box and just pop a message in there, just your name and where you're dialing in from, where you're joining us from, which city perhaps, or I'm Cindy, and everybody laughs because I'm Cindy from Sydney. Hey, Helen from Surrey Hills, Chelsea from Sydney, Christine from Brisbane, Francesca, Michael in the office in Sydney. Good to see you, Michael. Lovely to see you here. So thank you for that. And obviously I'm also joined here by my EA. Her name is Anne, and she's going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions or anything at all, or you require any assistance, she'll be ready and waiting to help you. So she's just popped a little note in the chat box there. So feel free just to reach out if you need any help. So that's all good. Now, just a couple of minor housekeeping points before we kick off. This is a safe and non-judgmental place for discussion, and I ask that we're all respectful of each other during this session. We will encourage conversation, and that's how we're going to get the most out of this session. So if you're speaking, that's wonderful. If not, maybe you can just stay on mute. I know we all dial in from different places. Sometimes there's a little bit of background noise, so just for respect for everybody else, we'll just keep that on mute while we're not speaking. And if you have a question at all, you can just use the chat box, or you can just pop your hand up. Anne will be keeping her eye out for you all the time. So feel free just to throw your questions in the chat box if you wish. But what we want is for you to get value from this session and to learn from others. We really value our community and our clients, and we strive to constantly create spaces for collaboration. So you might even find that you connect with somebody who's on the call who you haven't met before, and you want to take a conversation offline, and that's absolutely fine, and we welcome you all to do that. So this time is all about you. Now I can see we've got lots and lots of names and locations that have been dropping in, so thank you so much. And I know that there'll probably still be a few to add, but while you're doing that, I'll introduce myself. For those who don't already know me, my name is Cindy Nicholson. I'm the founder and CEO of Braintree, which is a global strategic leadership consulting organisation. And we focus on transforming individuals and organisations through self-development to enable them to break through barriers that might be holding them back or their organisations back, so they can really realise their true potential. Some of our clients have called me the business psychologist. Apparently I get into their heads and I know what they're thinking and help them realise things that they didn't know, if that makes sense. Now, something you didn't know about me was that about 12 years ago, I actually went through a divorce. I had 2 young children, hefty mortgage, and I had a very full-on job running a software company in the financial services industry, covering the whole of the Asia Pacific region. And it was a really stressful time. And a friend of mine suggested to me that I take up the services of an executive coach. And I'd never used a coach before. I had no idea what to expect, and I had nothing to lose. So I just went ahead, and I completely found that it changed my life. And from that day onwards, I really became passionate about wanting to give back and help other people realize the benefits of coaching. So firstly, I wanted to do that for my children, and then for myself, and then for others. And here I am 12 years on, helping to transform people and organizations, and I absolutely love it. So let's dive in and let's get into this discussion today. We're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a topic that's actually embedded in our signature leadership program, which covers all topics that traditional leadership programs don't. We talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, obviously. We talk about gender equality. We go through emerging technology. We look at different leadership principles. It's just such a rich program. And this is a little touch on what we cover in there. But if we look at working backwards, at the end of this session, our hope is that you get to take away 3 to 5 key actions that will help you make a positive change in your workplace or your community. And we'll work collaboratively to identify those actions. Okay, so this morning, what we're going to cover is the following. We're going to explore the meanings of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're going to look at some of the stats and facts. And we'll talk also about the good news. And we'll also talk about some key challenges. And then we're going to discuss some questions that are posed. And hopefully we can have those discussions and learn from each other. And then finally, you will have identified a few takeaways that you can take off into the workplace or your community, as we said. So if we first look at meanings, and look, I really welcome you to pop in the chat box if you agree, disagree, or if you've got, hi Sabana from New York. That's amazing. Congratulations for being here nice and early on our Tuesday morning. Yes, so going to diversity, inclusion and equity, just looking at a couple of the definitions. And as I said, anybody who's got a different view, please, drop that into the chat box. This is all about understanding how everybody perceives these particular areas. So diversity, if we just talk about that for a second, this really sort of represents the quantitative differences. So, for example, how many women are there in a workplace, or how many colour people are there on a board, for example. It measures that representation of cultural differences in our societies. Now, the second one, inclusion. This is also about the qualitative experiences that are around those differences. So, for example, what is the extent to which people can bring their whole authentic selves to their interactions across different aspects of their life? And how do they create opportunities in that regard as well? And then finally, equity, probably the most important one. And it's a process of recognising the historical legacies and the current reality of discrimination and prejudice that people from marginalised communities experience. That's just a quick high-level definition, just so that we're all on the same page. I'd like to just ask you to drop a Y in the chat box if you think that without equity, diversity and inclusion are not possible. I recently watched a panel discussion that took place at the World Economic Forum this year, and it was stated that diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I quote, is in a frustrating state of affairs. Companies are moving forward and backwards at the same time, and COVID and the war on Ukraine has slowed things down and exasperated inequalities. So it's really highlighted a lot of the differences that have really started to emerge across the globe. And they also went on to say that the gender gap has been extended by a full generation as a result of these, which is really, really significant. I remember in International Women's Day, we were talking about how long is it going to take to actually close that gender gap, and it was something like 135 years. So they're now saying that's been extended by a full generation. And then LGBTQI and women's rights are also under intense pressure in many, many places. And we all know, when wars break out, when there are stresses, economical stresses, women often are the ones that take the brunt of those issues and really do start to suffer. So I will share a link for you in an email that will follow up, and you can actually go in and have a look and listen to that panel yourself, and it's really, really insightful. So if you haven't seen that already, I will send that to you. Now, whilst that sort of sounds a little bit doomy and gloomy, I think it's also important to recognise that addressing diversity, equity and inclusion is not going to see a finishing line as such. It's an integral part of our global responsibilities, and we need to acknowledge that it's going through an evolution, and that's hence why we need to keep it front of mind, and we need to keep conversations like this going. But there is good news. Again, the World Economic Forum issued a report called Diversity, Equity and Inclusion 4.0, which suggests that companies with diverse employees have up to 20% higher rate of innovation and 19% higher innovation revenues. And there was evidence that companies reap benefits across key performance metrics, including profitability, innovation, decision-making and employee engagement compared to the market average. The report states that there are 3 key reasons why diversity, equity, and inclusion is a greater imperative than ever before for any business. And those are: moral imperative is really just saying this is simply the right thing to do, to give equal access and opportunities to all, to work under fair and equitable conditions. Inclusive companies declare fairness and opportunities for all as part of their corporate values and codes of conduct, and demarcating exclusionary behaviour as being fully unacceptable in those organisations. The other one is a legal imperative. So multinational organisations need to consider the rights and the entitlements given to potential employees across different locations by law when they operate in these different legal environments. We start to see that people are stepping up within organisations and talking about, what are these legal implications? What are the needs of the organisation? So they're starting to really sort of drive that within the organisations. And as I said, some of the people here are probably a representation of that group of people. And the third one is an economic imperative. A wide range of research conclusively documents that well-managed diverse teams significantly outperform well-managed homogenous ones over time. To achieve this, companies need to move beyond a focus of diversity for its own sake towards a focus on providing a safe, open and inclusive work environment that's underpinned by a sense of belonging for all employees. And in return, diverse and inclusive teams, if well managed, have a broader range of skills and knowledge. And they're better at identifying and solving problems that others might overlook. And they gain a competitive advantage in accessing new markets and higher market share. So a quick recap. We've just explored very high level the meaning of diversity, equity and inclusion. We've also looked at the benefits to organisations who embrace this in their core values, with the moral, legal and economic drivers encouraging organisations to take this seriously. I'll just share with you some of the insights that you gave to the key challenges that you said that organisations are facing. What do you consider the biggest challenges? So we've got 5 options there. We had corporate awareness. We've got a rate of 33% said corporate awareness is one of the biggest challenges. Government and regulation, interesting, was 0. Employee awareness was 50%. Leadership drivers was the highest at 58%. And culture and values was 33%. So that's quite interesting. It really stands out that the leadership drivers are the main issues that you believe that organisations are facing there. We're 20 minutes in. I think that I've done quite a lot of the talking. I'm going to open this up to discussion. So remembering that the goal for today is to take away 3 to 5 key actions that will enable you to make a difference. And there's no better way to do this than to learn from other people. And that's what I find is most beneficial in these sessions, is that we have a huge amount of intelligence, huge amount of experience in the room. And to be able to share that is just incredibly valuable to everybody. I'm going to pose this question to you. If you could change one thing in your organisation as it relates to diversity, equity and inclusion, what would that be? So that is the question. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop you into some different breakout rooms, and I encourage you to just talk amongst yourselves. We've got a backdrop here now of what diversity, equity and inclusion means, some of the challenges, some of the benefits, and I'd love you to go in with that backdrop and talk about, if there was one thing you could do in your organisation as it relates to diversity, equity and inclusion, what would that be?
Hello. I think what you've touched on here is really, really important. Going back to that phrase that we learn when we're parents, and even our parents learned it, it takes a village to bring up children. It also takes a village to bring up human beings. The village is diverse, and the more diverse that village is, the more growth that human being will have. And also it will take away that fear, if that makes sense, and allow that childlike curiosity to be expanded.
That's amazing. You know, from 0 to 7, a lot of our beliefs and everything are formed and secured. If you're growing up in a very diverse culture, which is accepting of everyone and everything, then you don't hold any prejudice against anything. And you welcome everything.
It's also, Cindy, the other aspect between those ages of 0 and 7, which are great. We learn a very fundamental thing in our cognitive skills. We learn our ABC. Take that to a growth factor in leadership. Always be curious.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And changing the stigma, if that makes sense. If you don't know something, ask.
Yeah.
Question. But more importantly, receive the answer. But also listen without, you mentioned it in one of the things, listen without prejudice. We tend to listen with an answer already there. Sometimes, and I think that where the real growth happens in leadership is listen and really listen.
It's very interesting. So with one thing, if you could boil that down to the one thing, are you saying that it's the culture that you would change on all those different aspects?
Without shadow of a doubt, because the culture has got to also accept a hybrid situation, a hybrid working situation.
Yeah.
But it's also got to change its language to be more of that psychological safety of encouraging people to come into the office and reconnect with your fellow human beings.
Yeah, that's such an important part.
It's also one of the key things. So when you're connecting with people in the real world, they've got your back psychologically, but you've also got their back. I think the one key message that I would change is the culture doesn't just come from the top. It's downstream and upstream. So strip away the job titles. The job titles are insignificant. It's the value of that human being.
There's a lot of amazing things that you've said in all of that.
Thank you.
It's really powerful, and it resonates so well with me. I was saying earlier that this topic that we're talking about is part of a leadership program that we've developed. One module is called The Future of Work, and this is in the future of work. And we touch on all sorts of things like gender equality. We talk about bringing coaching to your leadership style. We talk about different principles. And actually the whole thing, you go through the whole program, and at the end of it, you've created your own best practice new age leadership framework, which is based on culture and structure. So the reason that it actually was developed was because we realized that there's so much change that's going on in the world and so many influences that are happening externally and internally, that leaders aren't necessarily keeping up with all of that. It's really interesting because those changes that we need to embrace about these different influences that are happening, you can't make a band-aid sort of change to that. You've got to actually go right back to the culture and the organizational structure. So if you want to be open and collaborative and be accepting of all, but you have a culture that is toxic and a structure that doesn't enable people to be open, well, then how can you possibly actually execute on those changes? So it stems, like you said, it's from the top, but it's also from the bottom as well. But people have got to be allowed and given permission to be able to be open about what they're thinking.
But it's also got to have that fearlessness, as if we're childlike again, to be able to grow. So when you look at culture, you're looking at an inclusion culture also means the inclusion of your actual family is really important. A call out I would say about many organizations have done a fantastic job at investing in employee assistance programs.
Yes.
It might not be the silver bullet, but if you've never seen a psychologist or a coach or asked and received help, give it a go.
Yeah.
At least give it a go and make your own judgment on that. But use it. It's there as a tool in confidence. Hi, Barney.
Everybody in the room, Martin joined us, and we've just had the most incredible conversation. I gather there was some really interesting conversations happening in the rooms as well. So the conversations that you've heard today, what are the 3 to 5 things that you might be able to take away?
So I think, thanks for that. A few key things. One is the power of connecting with people. I shared with the fact that when we're children, we learn that it takes a village to bring up children. or as parents, we claim that to our children. It also takes a village to bring up adults. And the more diverse we have, the bigger our brain will grow, the more knowledge we will have, and the more empathetic we will have on others' feelings, others' thoughts, and we will go back to our childlike curiosity of our ABC, always being curious.
Yes, love that. Essentially, what we're talking about really is unless you're really caring for yourself, understanding yourself and being the best that you can be, how can you possibly be embracing others in your community and accepting others for who they are, what they are? You need to be showing up authentically yourself. So thank you, Martin, for sharing that. I'm hoping, obviously I couldn't be in everybody's room, but I'm hoping that everybody was able to have some really deep discussions. And, you know, my intent really was for you to be able to take away those 3 to 5 key actions that you can take back into your workplace or your communities that will help keep this awareness going and help to change the future as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So encourage you to drop any of those ideas in the chat box. We will be sending an email out later and you will get a worksheet so you can come back and you can listen through the conversation, you can reflect on things and you can make some notes around your actions. But look, we've got 10 minutes to go. I just want to encourage you, drop anything in the chat box as you feel free. We'd love to hear what your 3 to 5 key actions will be to take away. I just think that this has been an amazing conversation. I loved being in that room with you, Martin. We had a couple of other people there who were engaged and listening to what you were sharing, which was so insightful. I really, really enjoyed that. So thank you for being such an active participant in that. Now, did you get value from today's session? Yes, excellent. Can see all the whys. That's so great. That's what we want to be seeing and doing. And what was your biggest takeaway or insight? And while you're doing that, just before we wrap up, I just want to thank you very, very much indeed for giving up your time to be with us today, for openly sharing and supporting each other. Martin is a great speaker, full of information. Love it. Yes, thank you, Jasmine. I totally agree. Great to hear about the different challenges individuals face in different organisation types and levels of seniority. Thank you, Chelsea. And Martin, the power of connecting with others. It's incredible. Thank you. I just want to thank you for openly sharing and supporting each other and for trusting us to bring value to you today. And we can only continue to improve these events by getting feedback from you. So we'd love to hear what you liked or what you think that we could do differently so that we can continue to improve these all of the time. And you can appreciate that, you know, there's a lot of effort that goes into creating events like this. It does take time and resources, which we bring to our communities and our clients. And we just have one ask of you, and that's simply just to put some feedback for us on any of the channels that Anne's just popped up there on the screen. If you click on any of those that you prefer, just leave some feedback. Other people can understand what you've benefited from today. They can also join and be part of the community and take away from that as well. Now, one last thing, our regulars know that we never leave these webinars or workshops without actually giving something away. And today I'm feeling extra generous. So we've got a few tools for you. But the first thing is that you will receive a short worksheet with some information that might be helpful as a follow-up to this session today. So we'll drop that out in an email to you. You can reflect on today's session. We'll give you a replay as well of the session so you can go back and make some other actions and notes. The second is that we give away a free half-an-hour consultation. So as a certified coach and mental health practitioner, I work with leaders who are trying to increase awareness and achieve their own goals. And I warmly extend an invitation for you to experience a consultation to help you address any of those barriers you're facing. And Martin actually said earlier about the strength of EAP programs, and he said, ask for help if there's help available, and you can ask for it, give it a go in a confidential space. And that's exactly what I'm offering you today. So I really warmly welcome you to do that. Anne's just dropped a link into the chat box, so you can just click on that link and find a time that works for you. It's really, really simple. The final thing is that anybody who joins our webinars as well, we give you 30% off any of our products. So any of those things might be of interest to you. There's a link in the chat box there. You can have a look at what we can offer. That can be as low as joining some of our group coaching sessions at $25. And that immediately gives you access into our VIP group. And there you'll receive lots of free resources and other great tools. We send them out weekly and we keep you up to date on everything that's coming through. And we love having these conversations and discussions. So we'll be sending that to you in an email with all the details. So don't worry if you didn't get it just there on the chat box. Somebody's saying, where do I access the recording to share with my colleague I work closely with? Jasmina will send the recording to you in an email. You'll have a link to be able to replay that, and then you can share that with your colleagues. I hope that will address your question. And everybody, please feel free to share. That's what this is all about. It's about extending that community and support. Yeah, any links that you can click on, give us some feedback, any replies in emails. We'd love to get your feedback. We really do appreciate that. We're also going to drop some of the links to the YouTube panels that I talked about earlier, which I think you'll also find really insightful. And I guess just on that note, I just want to say thanks again for joining us for this session. And I really hope that you go into the rest of the day knowing that just by being here, you've actually contributed to the evolution of the diversity, equity and inclusion programs that we're trying to implement across the globe. So thank you very much indeed, and enjoy your day. Thank you very much indeed for your time.